You ever wondered how to set up UI elements to work with Common UI and the Lyra project? We're going to take some of those learnings and hopefully you'll be able to use what we're doing today in this 1 hour session to apply those to some of your workflows, and also just how do you keep things straight in your mind? How, when you're dealing with such a massive project like Unreal Engine, and you have so many different things, whether it's VFX or blueprints or UI or what, how do you keep it all? I'll give you a quick little hint. I don't keep it all straight. I can't remember it all. So I'm going to show you some of the tricks and things that I do in order to basically pull the threads that remind me how something is set up. What's up, everybody? My name's Kevin. Welcome back. We've got another indie dev stream for you. We try to make each of these a quick little 1 hour tutorial. Today we're going to be working on a little UI. Hopefully this one is a little bit more bite-sized. It seems like it might be reasonable for us to know how many lives we have left. There are often times when you're working through the Horde mode in the pit, and you can't remember if you have 1 life left or 2, or how careful you need to be. It just seems like whether or not we keep it, whether or not we need it, it just seems like something that a lot of people might want to be able to do. So we're going to be working with a quick little UI, showing you how that works with Lyra, as well as a gameplay messaging system and things like that to communicate back and forth. That's what we're doing today. These are live. You will hear community members here chiming in, asking questions, also helping remind me of things that I forgot, or whatever else it is going. If you have not played the game, playtest is out there. You can download it at ludicrousfilmandgames.com. The link is down below. My name's Kevin. I may not have mentioned that. We're trying something different with these intros now. Let's go. Let's get started. So, taking a look at our quick little problem here today, which isn't a problem. It's just something we haven't done yet. We've done a lot of work recently, if you haven't seen in our streams, to update our environment, art, background. We have elements that are not in style. That's okay. We just need something that is representative, that tells our players what is happening. And that is exactly what we're going to continue today. So for example, our cooldowns for our relic moves, these are all stolen from Lyra, right? We're using a bunch of the UI elements. We will skin those to be more on style at some point in the future once the game is nailed down. Doing it now, it's just going to potentially get thrown away once we figure out all the things that need to be on screen. So what I'm thinking is we're just going to put in the top left corner a couple little dots that represent how many lives that you have left. In order to do that, there's a couple things that we need to work with here. So let's get our bearings first. Goal: display how many lives left. Where is that information kept? Usually that information is kept either on the player state or the pawn. So that's where we're going to start looking. That's where we're going to start pulling those threads. Building the UI, that's something that's, you've probably built enough of these at some point, but figuring out how to tie it in to when the character dies, that's where I'm talking about how do you keep it all straight in your head? How do you do all these things? And the quick hint is I don't. What I do is I keep mental bookmarks of ways I've done these things in the past, hopefully the best version of those things, and I go back and I reference those to set that up for the new one. So let me make sure that we are sharing all the right stuff. We are. So in our UI folder, we know, for example, that there is a HUD for this game. The HUD is used by the Common UI, and the way this HUD works is it has, let me get this over here so you all can see it after I finish. There we go. Okay, so the way the HUD works, especially in the Lyra projects and Common UI projects, is there's a bunch of extension points that are defined. And this HUD gets loaded, and then UI elements like health bars and relic cooldowns, and for example, the quest system, etc., they use these visual markers that are all across this UI HUD, and that's where they get pinned to. That's where they show up on the HUD. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new extension point, And we're also going to create our new UI element. So let's just start with creating our new UI element that we're going to use as our placeholder. So to start with, let's go ahead and make a new widget blueprint. It's going to be a user widget. And this is going to be our widget blueprint lives. I don't know what else to call that. Lives. Well, all right, we'll call it lives. Okay.
Quick question: why are you doing a separate widget instead of adding it onto an existing one that you're already using?
That's a really good question. So a lot of it has to do with the current paradigm. So right now, each of the UI elements that get loaded are their own individual widgets, and they just and what's great about that is you can pick and choose what you're showing at different times. So in a way, it's a little bit of a decoupling, and it allows you to decouple the actual information from the specific UI that it's built for. So in this case, what happens if, let's say that we come up with a different game mode entirely, and the new game mode is maybe it's 3D or it is whatever it happens to be, and there are pieces of the UI that we want to still show, but maybe they don't show the same way, for example. Or there are things where, for example, we don't want to, when you equip certain weapons, certain UI elements disappear, etc. So you could have that, that used to be the way it worked. You would have just one UI and everything was in there. And with common UI, they moved to, it's not set in stone. A lot of people still do it the other way. I even have UIs that I built that are still built this separate way. But I have found, generally speaking, that when I build everything all in one UI, inevitably there's a reason for me to use a piece of it somewhere else. I'll give you a great example. The inventory system. When you pick up an item that you get on the reward screen, it uses an inventory tile. When you open the loadout screen, it shows you an inventory tile on the first screen. And then when you go to the artifact screen, it shows you inventory tiles there. I'm using that in 3 different places. If I hadn't built that inventory tile as its own separate widget, I would have had to go back, pull it all out, do it. Instead, I built it as one widget that I can reuse elsewhere. Am I going to reuse the number of lives remaining? Probably not, but it doesn't hurt me or slow me down to do it this way at this point.
Okay, so you use it, you look at it more like a component type
Yep,
of thing, right?
Exactly.
Like an, okay, gotcha. Thanks.
To make it modular, exactly. So we're gonna make this. We can make this pretty easy. Let's just throw in a border here, just so we see. And then I'm going to do a horizontal box. I think this is gonna be the fastest one. Horizontal, if I could spell it, a horizontal box. And then just as an example, rather than fill screen, let's go with desired. And then in this horizontal box, we're gonna put 4 images. I think we have 4 lives. Okay, 1, and then let's just duplicate this, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now we're not actually gonna, we'll see how modular we go. Okay, so we got 3 images in here. Let's get some spacing. Do we have padding on the horizontal? Yes, we do. Padding, but this is on the box itself. So let's just go with each of these images. Let's set our padding at 5 left and 5 right. And then let's change the background of our border to be, let's go black just so that we can see it. Probably make it semi-transparent just for now. I like to have a background here because I like to be able to see what's happening with the borders and everything as I'm building out the UI. For this image, we're going to actually use a brush. We're not even going to use an image right now. We're going to use I think it's gradient. Linear gradient. Oh, no, I think it's button. I think it's a round button we can use. Oh, it's called glow. It's the glow one. UI glow dense white. Okay, so you can see that's just going to be the little dot that represents our life, keeping it simple. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use that same glow for each of these. And then probably just for kicks, we'll tint it green, which is one of the nice things about using using RGB or black and white images. We can just quickly change these to tint them to be different things, red, etc. Okay, so this is our current life thing, and we can replace these images with something fancy later once the UI gets going. All right, but the idea here is we have our lives, but we do need a little bit of logic in here. So let's take this horizontal box and let's make this a variable. Horizontal box. So this is gonna be our horizontal box, and this is gonna be life container. Container. I'm gonna set this to a variable, and then actually what we're going to do is in here on the pre-construct, we're gonna take this guy and we are going to let's clear children. Clear the children. Now what this is going to do, this is kind of important to understand. What this is going to do is before it's built, and if it's just showing in the UI, it is effectively going to make this empty. So if we go back to our designer, you can see there's nothing in here now. By using pre-construct, it's overriding what we had put in there. If we disconnect that and go back, our images are back. I can see them. Okay, now let's compartmentalize this one more time. What we could do is we could set it up so that effectively here's what's going to happen. On construct, what we want to do is let's get the player control. I'm going to show you a little bit of what I'm talking about. Get the player controller, or get the player. Oh, can I just get the player state? Oh, that's nice. We'll see if that works. Can we get lives? We need to take a look at our game mode real quick. I need to remember where we track the lives is basically what I'm looking for. And what I'm pretty sure is in the game mode. We have, I'm looking for a plus, minus, I think. It doesn't like that. Death. Nope. Life. Lives. Okay. Maybe it's not in the game mode. Maybe it's in the... Is it in here? Is it in our player state? Hold on, let's see something. Continue. Did we just crash? Just by opening a blueprint? Oh no. Looks like it's gonna be one of those streams. Bummer. Welcome to Unreal, y'all. Alright, let's check lives here. Life. I swore, oh, this isn't the player state. That's why. Hold on, let's check their player state. Game mode. And while we're doing that, we're gonna restart, since we just lost everything we were doing. Okay. That's the starter game, source, player, state. So this is our player state. Do we have a lives here? Nope. Do we have a death count? Yes, death count. There it is. Whew. Okay. So that's what we're looking for. And we have increment death count. All right, so let's bring back what we were working on. Okay, go back to our UI folder. Did we actually lose it all? Also, we're missing Perforce. All right, widget blueprint. Let's connect. This will help me find Perforce. What is happening right now? Like my Unreal is frozen. Oh, there it is. It can't find workspaces. Okay. We're going without version control for now. So that was a widget blueprint. And it was... I don't even think it... Yeah, it didn't even save. Lovely. All right, let's speed run this. So we're going to create a new user interface. Create new widget blueprint. User widget. This is going to be our widget blueprint for our lives. Let's save that now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate that. And this is going to be our widget blueprint. This is going to be our life tile. Our life tile. Okay? So what's going to happen is we're going to set up a quick little tile in here. Super simple. And I'll show you why in 1 second. If we put a border in here, we take this border, we can make it black. Once again, we're going to drop that image in that we were using before. And that image, we're going to go with that glow material again. The glow for the UI, which was... dense white. Okay, and we're going to go with desired. That's fine. And then let's tint this green. Full green. Okay, so we've got our little dot. We're not super worried. We can go 60. Let's go 64 by 64. Let's compile and save that. Okay, the reason I made the tile is because what I want to do is inside the lives, we're going to, I'm going to drop back in the border again. And I'm going to drop in my horizontal box. Horizontal box. We're going to remake this HB lives container. Make that a variable. Compile and save it. And then what we want to do is, what I want to do is, let's get the player state. So get player state. Can I get the Lyra player state from here? I can get it from the object. This is going to return a... Nope, it's not even the right thing. So we're not going to worry about that. Let's just get the... Let's just make sure we're getting the right thing. So let's get the controller. And then from there, let's get the player state. Get the player state from the object. Okay, and then with that, we're going to cast this to a Lyra player state. And now that we have a Lyra player state, the whole point of this was so that we could get the death count. Okay? Now, death count, the way that we're set up is, there's a conversation to be had as to why we have a death count instead of a life count. But if we go back to our game folder, I believe in our game mode, we check the death count. Let's see. Death count. If it's not here, it's in the player. It may be in the pawn. So let's check our pawn. Death count. Do we check it here? Okay, so death count. So on death, what we do is we get our player state and we increment our death count. And then if our death count is greater than 3, then what we do is we go through and we end the encounter. That's how you get, that's how you eventually get corrupted. Okay, so this was the kind of like the number I was looking for. There's arguments to be made that what we should do is we should not have this greater than 3. We should create a function on the player state, has lives remaining. For example, reason being is right now the way we're set up is everywhere we check the death count, if we change the number of lives the player has from 4 to 3 or to 2 or whatever, that means we have to go through all of our blueprints and find everywhere we're doing this. That's the reason to not do that. Okay. Now, I'm going to save everything. For some reason, it is not connecting. Hold on. This would be a lot easier if I could connection. What is the name of this workspace? Connection, edit current workspace, freestyle. This is going to be a pain if I don't have this. Okay, those don't match. So let's go here. Let me try one more change here. 1356, 249, 56, 249, 173. There we go. Cool. Okay, that's gonna make this a whole lot easier. All right, let's go here, and let's take both of these and mark these for add, just so that we have them. Mark for add. Okay. So what we want to do is inside our lives, we're going to get the death count. And now we have to do weird math. This is why it's probably not awesome that we're using death count. So what we want to do is let's take subtract here. And now we've got to do this. We have to know that, and I don't like this. This is not a clean way to work. So we have to know that 4 minus the death count, because 4 is our max lives. I don't think we have a max life variable. So let's say we have death count. Yeah, we don't have, like, this is just not the best way to potentially handle this, because like I said, now we have to go 4 minus it, and then what we're going to do is we're going to put in a for loop here. We're going to do a for loop, because what we want to do is we want to create, if this is greater than 0, we're going to add the life tiles. This is what we're doing. Okay, so this is in our pre-construct. Okay, and the number of life tiles we're going to add is going to be based on this number. So once we have that, now we're going to take this, we're going to create a widget, and the widget we're going to create is our life tile. Okay, and then we're going to add child, and the child we're adding is the life tile. Okay, so what this should do is when this gets built, it should go ahead and get the player state from the controller. If it's a player state, it's going to get the death count. It's going to do the math to figure out how many lives you actually have. And then for each of those lives, it's going to create one life tile. Now, we don't know if this is going to work yet. So the next piece that we need to do is we need to add this widget to the UI. And this is where we get into a little bit of how Lyra is set up. So the way Lyra, common UI, etc. is what you're looking for is you're looking for where all these UIs get added, and they're usually in a data asset. And these are, so here's a data asset. This is the data asset for the plugin, and there's an add widgets option here, and there's a UI, and you can see the layout is the Zephyr HUD. That's that layout that I showed you earlier, which is here. Where'd it go? Here it is. Okay, so that's the HUD. And then each of these widgets, which is here, each of these gets added. So let's take, for example, some of the ones that we've added recently. Right? So we've got relic cooldown. Relic cooldown was added to the HUD slot for the relic. So if we go back to our layout, we should see, you can see HUD slot relic. That's this. And over here, you can see HUD slot relic touch. And it's for the extension point, HUD slot relic. So that's how basically when the common UI gets built and the HUD gets built, when this UI gets added, what happens is it goes through, it finds based on the tag where it's supposed to put this in the UI. All right, so what we need to do is we need to create another one of these. And so we're gonna put this, let's see here. These are text stacks. We're gonna put this in the top left. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to do this. Stats, that's the flow weave. That's our perfect strike. Let's duplicate the perfect strike, and we're gonna call this lives. And then we need to, just like we did, the reason I pointed this all out as far as the tagging and everything is we need to make sure we add a new tag for this. So the HUD slot, and in this case, we're going to add a new slot for lives. So let's go ahead and add a subtag, lives. We'll add the new tag. We'll check that box. Okay, so now we've got it. Now we've got to align it. Let's get this thing in the top left corner. Top left corner. So to do that, let's look at our anchors. We'll anchor top left. Okay, now that that's anchored top left, let's go ahead and make sure that, let's put in a size of 400 and 30, sure, that's fine. Z order left, left. Now the interesting thing is, okay, so when we snap that, you can see it auto-calculated the offset. So even though the pivot is up here, you can see our box is still down here. That's happening because it auto-calculated position to offset itself from that. So we can reset these back to 0. You can see our widget is now centered in the top left. That's controlled. That centering is controlled by where the pivot is. So if we move the pivot over and up and then reset our, oh, actually that was not the right one. Wrong pivot. This is the pivot we want. 0 and 0. So what this does is this moves the pivot point for this widget to be the top left corner. So this thing is always going to be pinned to the top left corner. Now, we will probably want to put in some padding and stuff like that, but for right now, let's just get this thing to show up. So compile and save. Okay, cool. Now what we need to do is we need to add our widget. So let's add a widget. And what we're going to do is we're going to, that's the input mapping. Hold on. Oh, I added a layout. I didn't add what I wanted. Delete, add a widget. Here's the widget. The widget we're gonna add is lives. Not the not lives tile, but the lives. And then our tag, we need to make sure we set our tag. This is gonna be HUD. And that's going to be, I don't see it there, so let's just search for it. Lives, HUD slot lives. Okay, now, this is pretty common for me. I go through, I do all this work, I get it where I think it's supposed to be, I start the game, and it's not there. So we'll talk through that in a second. Let's see if it's even there. Okay. Everything's saved, just in case. Yes. Look at that. Okay, so good job us. 30 minutes in, we've got our life, our lives. Now, we got a couple problems. We have one extra life because we forgot to account for the zero-based nature of for loops. That's one thing. And now we need to do the work. Now that it's showing up, we need to do the work to actually connect it so it actually shows how many lives you have. So let's go ahead and start on a couple of those things. So first off, what we know is this thing should be 3 minus, I believe. So we should only see 4 instead of 5 now. Yes, there we go. That's how many lives you get. Okay, but the problem is this is the pre-construct, which is good because when you first start, you want your life count to be accurate. However, when this changes, we need to update this. So here's what we're going to do. Let's talk about how I start to sort this out. And in the past, a lot of times what I would do is I'd keep a handle to the player state in here. We may do that. So we would store this as a variable for this widget. And whenever the death count changed, we would update it, for example. That's one thing we could do. But let's just see death. Yeah, so there's no death listener on the player state. Okay, so can we listen? Nope, we don't have that either. So this is a pretty common thing. Either we need to go back to our player state and add a new delegate and all these kinds of different things, or what we can do is we can do what we've done with some of our other HUD stuff, which if I press play, as an example, I'm trying to think of a good one. Probably our relic move. So if we look at our relic move, relic cooldown, in here, we're listening for gameplay messages. Okay? And this is kind of what I mean as far as pulling the thread. I don't remember everything that happens as far as like keeping it all straight. There's so many systems in this game, especially if you're doing indie dev or small crew dev. And to be expected to remember where all these things are is kind of insane. So I will often go find an example that works the way I want it to. And in this case, I like listening to gameplay messages and UIs now, because what I used to do is I used to store, like I said, either the player or the pawn, or even communicating between UIs, storing the parent of the UI. And that got very troublesome because if you changed the child widget, so for example, we put our relic cooldown in the HUD, and the HUD would update the information. That was a bad kind of architecture, because if you moved relic cooldown to a different UI or its own thing entirely, now everything no longer works. So I'm really liking the gameplay message system for stuff like this. And in this case, we're using the ability relic duration message here. And there's a bunch of these. Now, one of the things that I noticed while we were here is check for death. What does that do? Gets the onion player, checks the health component. Ah, there's an interesting one. Okay, I'm glad we looked at that. So look at this. For the health component, there is a death started, right? So what we could do is, let's try this the delegate route first. Okay, so with the controller, what we're going to do a couple things in here. I want to, undo. Let's get the control pawn. Get the control pawn. Okay, and we're going to store some variables here real quick. With that pawn, we're going to cast that to a 2D player. Cast to, oh, it's 2D hero, that's why. 2D hero pawn. And with that, I'm going to get the health component. And then with that health component, oh, that's interesting. There's a get death state call in there. I'd love to figure out what that does too. I don't want the health. I want the health component. And then let's bind death. Event bind on death. Let's say finished. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a custom event here. And this event is going to be event update lives. All right. And what this is going to do, so this is going to be cool. We are going to change the way this whole function works. All of this stuff, we're going to get rid of all this stuff. We are going to move it into its own, we're going to move it into its own event. Okay. And I'll show you why in a second. And this is going to be a custom event, add event. This is going to be event refresh lives. And that's what this is going to do. Now refresh lives is going to come in here. It's going to get the player state. It's going to see if we have our life count, etc. And it's going to add the children. Now, the one thing we do need to do if we're going to do a true refresh is we need to clear the children first. So the first thing we do, and I'm not worried about performance of this, you do not die that often. If you do, you do not win. So that's not a thing. So let's clear our children. Okay, so what we're doing here is whenever we refresh, we're just going to clear all the life tiles, and then we're going to rebuild them based on what the current death count is. Now, it is possible there might be a timing condition here, but let's finish this real quick. So we got our refresh lives. In here, we're getting rid of all of this. This is no longer happening. We're going to bind event, and then we're just going to call refresh lives. Refresh lives. Okay, nice, self-contained, easy. Okay, now, then the other thing we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing here. If we get this call to update lives, we're going to call refresh lives. So if we hit death, death finishes, we get down here, we refresh our lives. So now we don't have to duplicate that network everywhere. And theoretically, this will, if we are even calling into here, when we die, hopefully we will see a life refresh happen. Now, we may have to die a couple times here because wait a minute. We don't see our lives widget, do we? Hold on. I'm wondering, I'm wondering if the game wasn't ready when it first got set up. So we don't have lives yet. Death didn't, not only that, we don't see anything. Hold on a second. We broke something. We're not hitting either of these right now. Let's wait for experience ready, just in case there's a timing thing. I want to see if we are hitting this or this when we start. What did we break? This is our WB lives. Are we hitting pre-construct? We are. Are we hitting this cast? We are. Controlled pawn is unknown. So this is bogus here. So that's not working. Get controlled pawn. Get the controlled pawn. Get the player pawn. Play that again. Whoa. Okay. Let's do something. I think what we've got is we've got an issue where this is the players being set up before any of this happens, so none of this is getting triggered. So to test this, let's do this. I don't know if this is going to work in a UI. Delay, let's do a delay of 2 seconds. 2 seconds. And let's reconnect this in and see if we get this bind. Okay, we're definitely hitting the pre-construct. Yes, okay, so we've got a timing issue, but that's okay. We're gonna work through that in a minute. Okay, so we've got our 4 lives at the top. Now let's see if they update. So we just need to, I don't have a quick debug way to lower my health yet. So for now, hopefully these little guys go fast. Oh, I know what I could do. I could amp their... so I do this a lot of time when I'm testing. I could amp their stuff on the first. Okay, dog nabbit. I accidentally have... Shoot. Because I went full screen and that it hit the breakpoint. We didn't see it. So let's do this. Let's go encounters and do what I said. And then for the pit on wave 1, let's take our damage multipliers for the fodders and let's go 1,000. So that way when they spawn this time, let's go. Boom. One time. Oh, look at that. Dude, our line is updated. Now, it only updated the first time, though. Oh. Okay, so this is wild. We just learned something crazy. Okay. I did not realize that. So... Oh, so crazy. Okay, this is an argument for why you don't want to do this way. This is cool. This was successful. We built the lives. We're counting the lives. The UI shows up. We learned a couple things about timing issues. That's fine. But the thing that's more interesting is think about what happens here. When this thing gets constructed, when the character's first spawned, it gets the character and it binds to the character's health component. Then when death is done, it updates the lives. However, what happens is when the character dies, the pawn dies. When the pawn dies, the component gets destroyed. So the death finished binding no longer exists. That's why it only works the first time. So how might we fix this? There are a couple of things that we could do. One thing we could do is when we update lives, what we need to do is we need to build in a timer, like to update. Basically, we could make it so that this widget every so often checks to make sure that the player state and everything is good. That's one thing we could do. Not my favorite. Because there's a couple things here. One, we would probably want to unbind the event from this health component, for example, just to make sure this gets cleaned up. We could do some kind of trickery here to delay. We could put a delay, wait till the character respawns, and then when they respawn, it will rebind to that event and go again. But bottom line, binding to the death event, it worked, our UI is working, etc. I don't think it's the optimal way for all this to work though. So let's do it with the message system instead. So we've got 15 minutes left. We're doing, we do this a lot. We do things different ways in these little sessions because we learn a lot as we go through them, and that's what we're doing today. So that's one method, binding to the death event. You can sort out the timing of when your character gets created because it's gonna be different for every game. Like when is it ready, when it's actually there, as well as keeping track of, you know, rebinding and stuff like that. All right, so that's that. Now, let's go ahead and do, the listening method. So on pre-construct, I think what we want to do is, let's get, we're not even gonna do this. I don't think we're gonna do that. We're not gonna do death finish. We're gonna keep refresh lives. This is still good work. We don't need the health component. Get the player pawn, and then let's listen for gameplay. Listen for gameplay messages, okay? And this is where we gotta choose our channel. And in here, for kicks, let's do a search and see what other channels we're listening for. Find references. Beam cannons, pistols. I'm just looking for which ones are the going to be most like what we're doing. Attribute tiles. This is a cool one. This isn't gonna listen for the right thing, but it's another great example of when we use this. We're listening in this channel for ability attribute, combat set, base attack speed, message, any change to that. So that's just an example. I'm checking to see. Ooh. Ability respawn duration message. That's cool. Oh, look at that. There is a gameplay message, abilities respawn complete message. We might be able to listen to that same thing. Let's just try that. Because it's already set up. So let's go to our lives. We'll delete this. We'll put this in here. That's going to automatically work, theoretically. And then I'm not worried about the target. I'm not worried about the owning player. I'm not worried about the player state. I literally think all we have to do is on message received, refresh. Now refresh, it does get the player controller. Ooh, man, if it's that easy, that would be amazing. If it's not that easy, we just have to make sure we broadcast the message somewhere. So, boom. Oh, look at that. Okay, so that worked. That's cool. Okay, we have 3 lives. We're gonna get axe here. Boom. So when we respawn, look at that, we have 2 lives. That is totally working. We have 1 life remaining. Interesting. Corrupted. It looked like it skipped one. Did it look like it skipped one to you?
It looked like there was still 2.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Okay, so let's do a couple things. First off, we need, first off, this is cool. This is working. The lives get updated when respawn completes because we've already got it. And the cool thing about that is we know this is, where is that respawn happening? Hold on. Oh, because our respawn timer gets it, and then timer finished. Cool. We could easily bind, what we could do is we could also in our, where we actually call the respawn, or actually in our, here's where we could, here's another thing. I'll just show you where it is just as another option. So in our character, what I'm looking for is possessed. That's the high score. Here we go. When we possess, we change the team for the actor. We set up a bunch of stuff. We could, oh, that's interesting. On init state change. Okay, so that happens. And the function it calls is on init state change. Get a Lyra, setting up the GE. This is all happening after the character is started. So I know these are all safe. It's re-adding relic abilities. It's doing player stuff. And then it's doing an affliction manager thing, and none of this is happening. So what we could do is in this init state change as part of the player, if for some reason you didn't have the on respawn listener or whatever, what we could do is in here, when we're resetting up our character, we could just broadcast the message update lives, and we could listen to a message like update lives, for example. But this works fine for us. So let's just figure out a couple things. First off, let's fix this situation where when it first starts, there are no lives showing. So what we want to do is we're going to listen to messages, and we're also going to refresh our lives. And then whenever we receive the message, we're going to refresh our lives. Now, what we want to do in here is this may need to be greater than or equal to 0. That may be all this needs to be. Let's go greater than or equal to 0. This may just be an index thing. Okay, let's play that. You know what? Quick tip: if you have breakpoints that might be triggering, what you can do is take this window and move it off to the side. If like my monitor is big enough that I can have it. You can't see it because this is half my monitor. The other half of my monitor is on the other side. The reason I do that is because when the breakpoint triggers, if you're in full screen, you won't be able to press continue. So this way it's over on the other screen. If I need to, I can press continue if I need to. So first off, notice we have 4 lives to start with. That's cool. When we start, let's do our quick little counting here. Boom. 3 lives. Boom. 2 lives. 1 life. There we go. That's what it was. It was just a 0 index based thing. 1 life remaining, corrupted. And then look at that. That disappeared. Now, here's the trick. I'm not going to click this button. We're going to do this one more time. Normally at this point you click play again. I fixed this bug. So this will work now. However, I have a couple caveats. There has been an editor issue in the past where what happens is when there was an editor only bug where, I'm not going to check this out. There was an editor only bug where it would crash the editor. And I believe I fixed that too, but we're going to test it here now. So let's do this again. I wanted to make sure I had everything saved before I did that, because I did not want to lose everything we did, because even though this is stand-in work, I think this would be a good thing for players to have, to know how many lives they have left. Seems pretty standard. Especially when you get to wave 99, you kind of lose track. Now what's interesting is that all of a sudden reset to, what just happened? How did I come back to life? What in the world is happening? Hold on. Okay. I get killed. I get killed again. Oh, that was weird. It was like adding lives somewhere. Alright, so here's our last one. we get corrupted. Now the last piece of the test to round out the loop is when we play again, what happens? There we go, we're back. Cool. And we have 3 minutes to spare, y'all. Dude, we got an actual compartmentalized tutorial dev stream done in an hour, where we kind of walk through a bunch of cool stuff, hopefully. Before we wrap this up, a couple quick little things before I hit you all with, for questions is we've got our placeholder. There's lots of little visual things that we would want to do, right? We'd want to make the background transparent. We'd want to make the green dots, not green dots, actual like icons that represent life in Thern, the Rend. And I think there's some cool like hieroglyphic type symbols and symbolism that we could use to represent life. And so all of that should get made to be tonally accurate for the game. However, we haven't done the UI pass. I'm not stressed about it. We will probably put something temporary stand in just so that it's there. But those are all changes that you can make on your own. Hopefully this was helpful for you all. Before we wrap up today, were there any questions for the stream before we just hang out and talk general game stuff?
Yeah, it might be a little bit too late, but what if you wanted to go the other way? What if you wanted to add lives? You probably don't have anything set up for that, but like, let's say in your game, after a certain amount of kills, you earn a life or something. How would you go about like adding it in that system that you have?
No, that's actually a really great, that's actually a very good question. And that actually more exposes a design flaw. By using death count, it's not necessarily a death. So there's two different ways to look at this potentially as a design flaw. What we could do is we could decrease the death count. So for example, if you earn a new life and your death count was 2, we'd bring it back to 1. I think that's a little counterintuitive, right? I think it's probably, most games would probably benefit from calling it number of lives, for example, or life count, and decrementing it instead and adding to it. I think that makes more intuitive sense for developers. So it's probably worth saying that as a call out, we probably want to do that. However, so that's one kind of design setup flaw, not best practice, etc. But then to the actual design flaw, because we're listening to respawn, we don't get any information as far as changes to the death count itself. So that, what you just mentioned, is a screaming good case for why we should create a listener for when death count changes on the player state. The reason being, I wasn't thinking about it when we were kind of going through the tutorial. I didn't have really a good example, but that case alone completely changes how I would do this. And what I would listen for instead is a change in death count. And I would create a delegate or an interface or something, probably a delegate in C++ at this point in the player state, where when death count changes, it broadcasts a message and we can listen to that message. That is probably the cleanest way to do it, because then what happens is, and whether or not I'm saying death count or live count, doesn't matter. The point is, when death or life count changes, you broadcast a message, the UI would listen to death count changes and it would just know to update on that case. And that way, if you got an item that granted you an extra life, then that setup would still work. That's kind of the point there. So that case alone is a fantastic question and completely changes not the underpinnings or the listening or the building of the UI or any of the things that we've done in that regard. It just changes to what we listen to. Changing a respawn doesn't work in that case. So I would build a delegate, actually. It's a really good question. Cool.
Would you be
anything else
to rebuild? Yeah. Would you be? Does that mean that you might rethink how you were counting the deaths or?
Yeah, I'm gonna
doing
rebuild it.
this? Right.
I
fair
will,
enough.
I will, I will absolutely rebuild it. It won't take very long from the standpoint of what all I'm going to do is I'm going to add a delegate to the C++ for the player state. And in a lot of ways, that'll just be cleaner in general because we already have the player state in the, we were working with it to get the death count anyways. So what we'll do is we'll bind a death count changes on the player state. And the other reason that works really well is player state survives, respawns. So we don't have to worry about the timing. Right? So we don't have to worry about has the encounter started, is the pawn possessed yet, none of that stuff. The player state persists across all those things. So it actually simplifies a lot of things. So C++ streams are very dry, so I would not, we wouldn't do that as part of just the stream in general. So the piece here is all the stuff we did to build the UI, to listen, etc., all that still applies. All the learnings, all great. The only thing we're going to change is what we're listening to. That's it. So, fantastic question. I will absolutely rebuild. I'm not sure if I'm going to change death count to live count yet or not. I have to see what that potentially breaks. So, that one I'm on the fence on.
All right.
Cool. Anything else for the stream? All right, cool. Everybody else, as always, thanks for supporting the channel. Thanks for playing the game. Thanks for submitting your feedback. It's super helpful in us making this game something that you all want to play. My name's Kevin. I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day. Take it easy.